Hello, BookTube. I thought I'd come to you with another top 10 list. We're in the midst of New World's November and the beginning of Howl for the Holidays. Science fiction all the time, sort of. And I thought, thinking about things, I thought I'd do a top 10 of science fiction series. Now, I've attempted to record this a couple times, but I got only up to like three of them done, the top from 10 to 7, and I was like 20 some minutes in, so I'm gonna have to abbreviate this very much. But these are sort of my favorite, for me, the top 10. It's I have not read every science fiction series there is, and you will see that a lot of these are heavy classic science fiction, but there's some newer stuff as well. Um, and there's a lot of other series that I've read part of it of, and I'm missing too many books. For instance, like Ben Bova's, oh, what's it called? The tour or whatever of the solar system. I didn't realize that he'd written so much other stuff for that, so I couldn't include that. And it just, the list goes on of ones that I've read parts of, but not enough. There is one cheat on here because one of these series I have not read the final book, but I can't leave that one out. And it's only the one book, and the other ones have many books that I haven't read in the series, and a lot of newer ones that I want to try that I haven't even read. Okay, so enough of that. Let's get to it. And these are in order from 10 to 1. This for some reason was a lot easier. I normally can't do a countdown 10 to 1 for things, but I can with this one. Number 10 is Skylark, a series by Doc Smith. Skylark of Space. It was serialized in the 20s. And then came out in book form in 1946. It was originally written or part of it was written in the mid-teens to late teens. So it's very early. And then Skylark 3, again, serialized 1930, book form 48. Skylark of Valerian, serialized 1934, published in book form 1949. Then the last one, Skylark Dickensie, and serialized 65, so it was late and published in 66. I'm just moving these things back because I do have some prompts here for these. And I've got really rough copies of this series. I think I've got all 4. This is Panther. I picked these up for like 10p at a charity shop, a bunch of Doc Smith. And they're rough, and like you say, I just never got the sticker off, and it's faded even. But yeah, so it's pure space opera. Two rivals fighting it out, and expanding their fight into the galaxy, the universe. On a large scale. There's no depth to it really. It's just fun. It's just pure fun. And then we continue with Doc Smith for number 9 is the Lensman series, and it takes like sort of the space opera aspect of Skylark and ramps it up many notches. And it starts out with Triplanetary, which is published in book form in 48. First Lensman 1950, Galactic Patrol 1950, Grey Lensman 1951, Second Stage Lensman 1953, and Children of the Lens 1954. Now, 4 of these have been reprinted by the Golden Age Masterworks. So that's the last one, Children of the Lens, and we've got Second Stage Lensman, which originally 53. That's the 5th one, and then the 4th one is Grey Lensman, that was published in 1951, and the 3rd one is Galactic Patrol, which was published in 1950. So I'm hoping to get. I think I have the other 2 copies in those rough old ones. But yeah, it's space opera writ on a massive scale. It covers billions of years into the past and into the future. Huge space battles with galactic patrols. That have like massive space battles with thousands of ships. Actually, if I remember right, I don't think it's not hyperbole there. thousands of ships. See, there's the patrol right there that's coming by. Uh, um, and huge lasers slicing up ships and planets basically, and you can see where J. Michael Straczynski got the idea for his battles in Babylon 5. So yeah, great stuff, but again, not intellectual or anything like that. Just and all these two have all the cliches of the time, and the cliches of which became cliches in the genre of space opera, which they created. Doc Smith and Jack Williamson and a few others. They're the ones that set the template for what people wrote later. And number 8 is Barsoom, Edgar Rice Burroughs, a series of 11 books, published serialized for the most part, 1912 to 1964 in book form as well. 11 books: Princess of Mars, Gods of Mars, Warlords of Mars, Thuvia, or Warlord of Mars, Thuvia, Maid of Mars, The Chessman of Mars, The Mastermind of Mars, The Fighting Man of Mars, Swords of Mars, Synthetic Men of Mars, Lana of Gathol, and John Carter of Mars. The John Carter of Mars was published in the 60s because it was a couple sort of short stories and novellas, I think, that were never collected up until that time. And most people know the story. John Carter, a American Civil War veteran, falls asleep in a cave, winds up on Mars, and he becomes like a Superman. And the sword and swashbuckling swords and all this kind of stuff. But because he's a Superman, because the gravity is less on Mars, so he's stronger. And it just his adventures there. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is number 7, and this is what's been called a trilogy in 5 parts. Originally done for the radio, the BBC radio, and then the book was written. I'm not sure where the original TV series comes in, whether it was before the book or after. If I knew, I've forgotten. But that was 1979, the book. 1980 is The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. And then 1982, Life, the Universe, and Everything. 1984 with So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. And 1992, Mostly Harmless. It basically follows the adventures of Arthur Dent, for the most part, and Ford Prefect. Arthur Dent is a human. He is saved by Ford Prefect, who came to Earth researching and updating the guidebook, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where Earth only had Harmless in it. And so he updated after spending a long time here. He became stranded because it's a backwater, and no spaceships were coming by so he could hitchhike on. But he updated it after a while to say Earth is mostly harmless. So it's very humorous, and it just, as I say, there's time dilation, there's time travel, there's dimensional things, all sorts of stuff. Everything that you can think of from science fiction, Douglas Adams has stuffed into these books. And there has been a 6th book written by Owen Colfer, I think it is. Kofi or Kofer, I'm not sure the pronunciation. I've not read it. I've listened to the radio series, which I didn't think was that great, but yeah, I might read it sometime. So let's move on. Number 6, Riverworld by Philip Jose Farmer. Oh, I forgot to say that the Edgar Rice Burroughs, there's the first 3 books that are in the Golden Age Masterworks by Gollancz. The Riverworld series by Philip Jose Farmer consists of 5 books and a number of short stories by him and other writers. But it starts out with To Your Scattered Bodies Go, which was published in 1971. It's a fix-up novel from other short stories, and one called Riverworld, which was eventually in 1979 published separately. It was sort of the original version of the story. And and then it moves on to The Fabulous Riverboat, 1971. The Dark Design, 1977. Yeah, I've got book club editions of the first three. Yeah, the first three. No, first four. Sorry. So there's 5 books. What did I say? There's 5 books. But anyway, I've got book club editions, which were nice. I got them really cheap, so I'm happy with those. That was The Dark Design, The Magic Labyrinth, 1980. Again, a book club, and I don't have the final novel yet. Is The Gods of Riverworld, 1983, and that is special because Louise Brooks is on the cover, and the reason why she's there is because Riverworld is a world somewhere in the galaxy or in the universe that every human that has ever lived wake up on the banks of this sprawling river that goes across, all snakes around this whole world. And it's Riverworld. And Sir Richard Francis Burton, Richard Burton, the explorer, is one of those. And being Richard Burton, and he's mainly known for a couple things, but one of the things is to try to find the source of the Nile. So what would a self-respecting explorer who did that wake up on a planet in the middle of nowhere and is a river? What would he do? Set up shop? No, he looks for the source of the river, and that's his journey through this. And with every human that had ever possibly that lived is a potential character through this, and he's got some interesting ones. And he recreates sort of society, because societies start growing. Sociology, there's anthropological stuff. It's really, really good. Enjoyable. It does. I think he flogged it a little too much, and the ending is a bit flat than it should have been. But even so, it's definitely worth a reread. So, as I say, in it was in 1983 that the original story was published in book form, and then there were 3 collections. The first collection was all his stories, called Riverworld and Other Stories, and I don't think that is the original story. I don't think of the Riverworld story. The original River story is separate, but my memory is a bit shaky on that. But anyway, there was 2 collections that were written that were sort of shared collections that had one. I think one of the volumes had 1 story by a farmer, and the other one had 2, and I'm not sure which one it is here. But there's Tales of Riverworld, 1992, that was published, and there was a lot of other writers that were involved with that. And then Quest for Riverworld in 1993, the same thing. And then I think there was another few stories that he wrote in various other places that sort of didn't have a direct connection to the storyline, but it was set on the planet. Number 5 is Giant Series, James P. Hogan. The first book was published in 1977, called Inherit the Stars, and there's the paperback version with a Darrell K. Sweet cover, or artwork on the cover. And then it was followed up in 1978 with the Gentle Giants of Ganymede, 1981 Giant Star, 1991 Entoverse, and 2005 Mission to Minerva. Now, this is where I've cheated slightly. I couldn't leave this series out, but I have not read the final book, Mission to Minerva. That was published the year that I moved to the UK, and I never got around to reading it. I have them all now, and I will go through them. To me, it's a fabulous story. Well, as you can see on the cover there, astronauts find a human skeleton on the moon that has been there for longer than basically I think humans have been around. Or at least they think humans have been around. That's the key here. And it turns out there was a planet that used to be where the asteroid belt was, called Minerva, and they were, it was populated by giants. Hence the Giants series. They're sort of bluish, grayish blue, I think it is, tall, slim. And then they find a ship buried on Ganymede, on the moon Ganymede, and then at some point, a ship, they're in time dilation, a ship returns with Ganymedes on it. But they find that there is another planet that their ancestors had moved to, and we find out that there's some humans there as well, and there's some genetic engineering. I won't go into all the details, but it's a really good story. But as I say, I've not read the final one, so I don't know how he ends it. So that will be a nice surprise for me. Okay, moving on. Number 4. Well, number 4 and 3, again, I guess you could say is a bit of a cheat because they have been pulled into a overall series when they were originally separate series. But the series that links them is good, but not as good as these two. So, and also to fill out the list, I separated them. And that is the Robot series by Isaac Asimov. This is number 4. There's like 35 to 40 short stories, started in 1939, right up to late 80s or even early 90s. I think even a few things were published possibly posthumously after he died. But most of them were short stories, first of all, and they're sort of linked in the evolution of robots, in a sense. Not always linear and not always not linear because not all following a specific timeline and that kind of thing. But it's like if you take it as a whole, as sort of the idea of the evolution of what he was doing, the evolution of creating robots and them in stories, as well as the evolution of sort of the scientific way of looking at robots. Those are two interesting ways you could do it, rather than say, oh, okay, well, that doesn't fit into the timeline or something like that. But you can separate that and say, well, it fits in because of the evolutionary aspect of it. But then the first novel was a fix-up novel of short stories, mostly Susan Calvin related, 1950, called I, Robot, and that was published by Gnome Press. Gnome Press was a very short-lived publisher, very contentious with authors. But it was one of the sort of the big three early specific publishers, along with Shasta Press and Fantasy Press, who Fantasy Press published the Lensman series and a bunch of Heinlein as well. Anyway, enough of that. So yeah, and then we got like I, Robot, 1950, and then 1954 is The Caves of Steel, which was written as a novel, and then 1957 The Naked Sun, another novel, and these are sort of mystery detective type things, because you got an android, Daniil, and you've got Elijah Bailey, a policeman, investigating murders in each of those, and even in the fourth one, The Robots of Dawn, 1983. And that is sort of ends where Elijah Bailey, and then Robots and Empire for 1985, and that's where he was sort of loosely linking it to the Empire series, where Elijah Bailey is gone, but Daniil and another robot are there, well, until the end of the book, but I won't spoil it. So yeah, and then we jump ahead to number 3. So we're getting close. Number 3 is the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov. Now, again, this was written over basically a 40-year period. You might as well say 42-year period. It started out in 1951. John W. Campbell wanted him to write a future history style series, a la Robert Heinlein. Asimov kind of balked at it, but he did write some novelettes that he put together as a trilogy called the Foundation Trilogy. Foundation, the first one was 1951. It was published, and Foundation Empire 1952. 1953 was Second Foundation. And as I say, there were novelettes that sort of worked together, and it came up. It won a Hugo for, I think it was 1966 or in the mid 60s anyway, for best series. It was up against the Lensman, but obviously Foundation has more depth than Lensman does. So I'm glad that in retrospect that had won, even though they're both great. But then in the 80s, he decided to expand it. So he wrote two more to follow, Second Foundation, Foundation's Edge in 1982, and then he wrote Foundation and Earth 1986, which leaves it sort of wide open to so much more, but never happened because he had died after. He never continued on there. But he wrote two more after that, though, but prequels to the Foundation, the original Foundation trilogy. So 1988, he wrote Prelude to Foundation, and then Forward to Foundation in 1993. So the actual internal chronological order is Prelude to Foundation, Forward to Foundation, Foundation, Foundation and Empire, Second Foundation, and Foundation's Edge, and Foundation and Earth. Now, again, like with other things, there's been other writers that have pitched in and written other things. There's a second Foundation trilogy that's by the three Bs, Binford, Gregory Binford, Greg Bear, and I always forget one. Gregory Binford, Greg Bear. I can't remember the third one, but anyway, people know, and I'm sure somebody will correct me in the comment section. But yeah, that's I'm blanking at the moment. But yeah, and it's got to do with something called that he created psychohistory and sort of rise and fall of galactic civilization, and he based the idea from Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. And it's just, and he creates a science called psychohistory. It's just a fabulous series. And then number two, we're getting there, but we're still long, but not too long yet. Dune by Frank Herbert, the original 6 books. Started out Dune 1965, 69 Dune Messiah, 76 Children of Dune, God Emperor Dune 81, 84 Heretics of Dune, and then 85 Chapter House Dune. What can I say about this? I think most people know it's set in the far future on the planet Arrakis. It's a feudal sort of society where technology is there but not quite there, and everyone in the universe, or the galaxy anyway, seems to be addicted to a drug called the spice that is only produced on this one planet, this desert planet, Dune, Arrakis. And it follows, the first 3 books follow a young boy. Well, he's a teenager, Paul Atreides, and his godhood, basically, of him being turned into a god. And then it continues the story after that. Just a momentous series. And again, while his son Brian Herbert has continued with I don't know how many, with Kevin J. Anderson, how many books. I haven't read any of those, and I'd like to someday to actually read them, just to see. I don't think that they're not even. I don't think they'll even hold a candle to old Pappy's work, but yeah, I'd like to do that. So yeah, Dune number 2, and then number 1. Drum roll. This won't be a surprise for a lot of people, I don't think. The Hyperion Cantos by Dan Simmons. 1990, Hyperion. 1990, Fall of Hyperion. 1996, Endymion and the Rise of Endymion. I'm saying that wrong, and I know that, but I can't get my brain around it at the moment. Sorry. And then there was a short story in 1999 that continued on with the story slightly, or a part of the story, I should say, called Orphans of the Helix. And that was published in a collection called Far Horizons, which was authors sort of continuing their series in short stories. And that's in there. And there's also two previous stories that are sort of, they're connected to this because they're stories that he took ideas from and one of them he adapted and put into Hyperion. Um, and yeah, I just off the top of my head I should have had those ready. Sorry, but though that can easily be found, you just do a search for Hyperion if you're interested in that. They're not directly related, other than that they sort of have kernels of ideas. Of like one of them is basically the story, the series story um, of one of the characters telling the story. It's his story, his family's story. And then there's a bit of a sort of early version of the Shrike in a story where you can see where he pulled stuff and adapted from. Anyway, yeah. So it's a far flung. It's a very deceiving novel. On the surface, it's a space opera, but it's multi-layered. It's full of philosophy, religion, history, how you view time, how time works, AIs, and like artificial intelligent computers, and the humans' reliance on technology, and this kind of stuff, and how it affects humans, and how humans sort of potentially have developed technologically and spread throughout the galaxy, but at the same time haven't a lot of times matured psychologically, I guess, or mentally, in many ways. And I find it fascinating. It's definitely my favorite series for it, and I've read it many times, and I'll continue to reread it. Anyway, do let me know what your favorite series are. And as I say, there's lots that I haven't read, or there's lots that I've read parts of, and would like to continue and finish them. But I didn't want to put them in. And as I say, I cheated a little bit with the Giants trilogy because it was so good, and it was only one book. So I do hope you forgive me for cheating there. But yeah. And yeah, and have you read any of these? What did you think of these series? Anyway, that's it. I'll be back tomorrow with a wrap up of the first week, even though we're into the second week of New Worlds November, and then I'll do specific videos for some themed stuff that I was reading for the first week. Take care, BookTube. Thank you.